The envelope was thin, cream-coloured, and trembled in my hand. No return address, just my name at Quinn Shepherd, scrawled in a careful, almost childish hand. I was 30 years old, and I hadn't seen anything from that side of my family in 17 years. Not since the day my mother, Margaret, had decided I was no longer part of her perfect new life. Before we move on, tell me where you're watching from. I love mapping my viewers. I almost tossed it, honestly. My first instinct was to crumple it into a tight ball and send it straight to the recycling bin, just like I'd done with every Christmas card that had somehow slipped through her carefully constructed blockade in the early years. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the unfamiliar handwriting. Maybe it was the faint scent of lavender, a perfume Margaret used to wear, clinging to the paper like a ghost. Then I saw the name, scrawled faintly in the bottom left corner, almost hidden by the flap. Poppy. Poppy, my half-sister, the one I was never supposed to know, the one Margaret had built her new world around, erasing me from existence as if I were a smudge on a pristine white tablecloth. My stomach clenched. I slid a finger under the flap, careful not to tear the delicate paper. The words inside were neat, hesitant, but urgent. Dear Quinn, I know this is probably a shock. My name is Poppy. I'm 17. I know you're my sister. I just found out. My mum, Margaret, she told me you were unstable, dangerous, that you left. But I found some things, letters, old photos. Please, I need to talk to you. I don't know who else to trust. Can we meet somewhere far away? Please don't tell her. She can't know. Poppy. My vision blurred. Unstable. Dangerous. That was Margaret's favourite narrative, her go-to explanation for why her firstborn child had simply vanished from her life. It was easier than admitting the truth, that I was a living, breathing reminder of a past she wanted to bury. The pain, sharp and familiar, sliced through me. It was the same pain I'd felt 17 years ago, the day Poppy was born. I was 13 then. My grandmother, Angela, had smuggled me into the hospital, her eyes full of a sorrow I only understood years later. Margaret, my mother, was in a private room, looking radiant and exhausted after giving birth. Just for a minute, sweetie, Angela had whispered, guiding me towards the bassinet. I'd peered over the edge, my heart aching with a tenderness I hadn't known I possessed. A tiny, perfect bundle, swaddled in a pink blanket. Her eyes were closed, her tiny fists curled. I reached out a hand, wanting nothing more than to touch her, to feel the warmth of her skin. My baby sister. But Margaret's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the quiet room. Don't touch her, Quinn. She's not yours. Angela had flinched. I'd frozen, my hand hovering inches from the baby's face. Margaret had looked at me with an expression I'd never forget, a mix of disdain and something close to fear. She'd looked at me like I was a mistake, a stain on her fresh start. A nurse, a kind woman with tired eyes, had gently taken my arm. Maybe you should wait outside, dear. Your mother needs rest. I'd backed away, tears stinging my eyes. The image of my mother's cold face burned into my memory. I never got to hold Poppy, never got to touch her. That was the last time I saw Margaret for years, and the last time I saw Poppy as a newborn. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers from my father, Lawrence Shepherd, were finalised, and Margaret had moved out of state with her new husband, Reuben Sanderson, taking her new baby with her. I was left with my father, who was more absent than present, and the gaping hole where my mother used to be. Now, 17 years later, this letter. Poppy reaching out. The girl I was never supposed to know, the one who was supposed to be Margaret's perfect, unblemished child. I reread the letter, my fingers tracing the hesitant lines. Somewhere far away. Please don't tell her. A diner, 85 miles north, just off the highway. A place I'd passed 100 times but never stopped at. Perfect. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and a half-empty pack of cigarettes. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but something else was stirring now. Something cold and calculating, a flicker of possibility. I drove through the night, the hum of the engine a steady rhythm against the chaotic drumming of my thoughts. The memory of Margaret's face, the one that had haunted my nightmares for years, was sharp and clear. But now, it wasn't just pain. It was a question, a challenge. The diner sign, a faded neon glow against the pre-dawn sky, appeared exactly where Poppy had said it would be. My headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a lone figure hunched in a booth by the window. She had her back to me, but even from a distance I could see the slight tremor in her shoulders. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy glass door, and walked inside. She looked up, her head snapping towards the sound. And when I saw her, God, she had my eyes. The same shade of deep hazel flecked with gold, though hers held a wide-eyed innocence mine had lost somewhere around my 13th birthday. Poppy, my 17-year-old half-sister, looked exactly like the Margaret I remembered from before the coldness set in, but with a softness around the edges, a vulnerability that Margaret had long ago shed. "Quinn?" Her voice was a hesitant whisper, barely audible over the clatter of plates from the diner kitchen. I slid into the booth opposite her, the worn vinyl sighing beneath me. "Poppy." My voice felt rough, unused to saying her name out loud. She chewed on her lip, her gaze flitting around the nearly empty diner before settling back on me. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know if you would." "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. 17 years of silence had built a wall around me, and it wasn't easy to dismantle. "You're my sister." Her eyes welled up, and she quickly blinked, trying to compose herself. "Mum said..." "She said you were unstable, that you had problems, that you just left one day and never looked back." I leaned forward, my elbows on the table. She lied about everything. And then I started talking. I told her about the holidays I spent alone with my father, Lawrence, who was more a ghost than a parent, while Margaret built a new, perfect family. I told her about the phone calls that went unanswered, the messages that were never returned, the emails that bounced back with a recipient unknown error. I told her how, after Angela died when I was 15, Margaret had changed her number, moved house again, and effectively cut me off entirely. I told her about the years of trying, the years of hoping, and then the slow, bitter realization that I had been erased. Poppy listened, her face paling with each sentence. The innocence I'd seen in her eyes began to crack, replaced by a dawning horror. Her perfectly manicured hands, so unlike my own calloused ones, trembled as she gripped her mug of lukewarm coffee. "But why?" she finally whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Why would she do that?" "Because I was a reminder," I said, the words tasting like ash. A reminder of a life she wanted to forget. A life with my father, a life before Reuben. You were her fresh start, her perfect child. She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I found them in her old jewellery box, hidden under some costume pearls." She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a small, worn leather-bound journal. "They're scans." I didn't want to take the originals. She slid a tablet across the table. The screen glowed, displaying a scanned image of a letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Angela's, my grandmother." "My dearest Quinn," the letter began. "I know things are hard right now. Your mother is complicated. She's made her choices, but never forget you are loved. Never forget you are my granddaughter. I will always fight for you, even when others won't. Hold on to your strength, my girl. This too shall pass. There were dates on the scans, letters written to me from Angela after Margaret had started her campaign of silence, letters written when I was 13, 14, even one dated just weeks before Angela passed away when I was 15, letters I never received. Margaret had intercepted them all. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Angela had tried to reach me, had tried to tell me I was loved, and Margaret had stopped it. Poppy scrolled through more images. And these? The next images were family photos, Margaret and Reuben smiling, a younger Poppy, maybe 5 or 6, riding a pony, holidays, birthdays, school events. But in several, I saw it, the faint outline where a figure had been, a jagged tear, a clumsy scissor cut right through the middle of a group shot. My image literally cut out, erased. A cold rage, sharper than any pain, began to bloom in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Angela, about the truth she tried to tell, about the lengths Margaret went to maintain her lie. And it was about Poppy, who had been raised in a gilded cage of deceit. She cut me out, I murmured, my voice flat. Literally. Poppy nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know what to do. My whole life. It's a lie. She's a lie. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was smudged with tears, her hair a mess, but there was a fierce, determined glint in her hazel eyes, the same glint I saw in the mirror every morning. This wasn't just a reunion. This was an opportunity, not just to heal, but to make Margaret face every single thing she had tried to bury. Poppy, I said, my voice low, steady, what else did you find? She hesitated, then leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. I have access to everything, the house, the guest list. The will. I have access to everything, the house, the guest list, the will. Poppy's whisper hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. We spent the next few hours huddled in that diner booth, the coffee growing cold, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. We sketched out a plan, raw and ambitious. Sunday dinner next weekend. Poppy's 18th birthday was coming up in a few months, so a birthday dinner was a perfect innocent cover. Margaret loved a good performance, and Poppy's milestone birthday would be a prime opportunity for her to play the doting mother. We need proof, I told Poppy, my mind already racing. Not just your word, not just my word, hard evidence. Poppy nodded, her eyes still red-rimmed but now alight with a fierce determination. I can get it. I know where she keeps everything. Back in my apartment, the first person I called was Zlata. My best friend, my rock, she answered on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep. You're up early, Trouble, she grumbled. What fresh hell are you brewing? You won't believe it, I said, and then I told her everything, about the letter, about Poppy, about the cut-out photos and Angela's intercepted letters, about the plan for Sunday dinner. Zlata was silent for a long moment. Then, holy hell, Quinn, this is biblical. She paused. So, what's the play? You just show up? No, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. We don't just show up. We make her face it, every single lie, every single thing she tried to erase. Good, Zlata said, her voice sharpening. But you need to be smart. Document everything, every lie she's told, every piece of paper, every conversation. You need a burn file, Quinn. Something that can't be denied. That's when Poppy called me. Quinn, I got something. She'd gone home, acted normal, and then, with a cunning I hadn't expected from her, she'd managed to manipulate Margaret into leaving a voicemail. I was talking about you, Poppy explained, her voice low and conspiratorial over the phone. I said I was feeling down, missing a friend who'd moved away, and I mentioned how some people just disappear from your life, like a disease. She just ran with it. I played the audio file Poppy sent me. Margaret's voice, smooth as silk, dripping with feigned sympathy. Oh, darling, sometimes people are just toxic, like a disease, really. You cut them out and you heal, you thrive. It's for the best, believe me. My stomach churned. She wasn't talking about some random friend. She was talking about me, calling me a disease. Poppy had baited her, and Margaret had swallowed it whole. This was gold. A few days later, I was meeting Zlata for coffee. We were going over the list of potential guests for the dinner, trying to identify who might be sympathetic, who might be a flying monkey for Margaret. You know who might be useful? Zlata mused, stirring her latte. Your uncle, Ricardo Barnes, Margaret's half-brother, my maternal uncle. I hadn't seen him since I was a kid. He was a failed artist, always chasing some new get-rich-quick scheme. I knew he and Margaret had a strained relationship, mostly because he'd been cut out of Angela's will too, after Margaret had taken control of her affairs. Why Ricardo? I asked. He's been trying to get in touch with you for years, you know, Zlata said, her eyes narrowed. He's called me a few times, asking about you. I always shut him down, figured he was just after something. But now, he might have something for you. Before I could ask more, a man slid into the empty chair at our table. He was 42, Ricardo's age, with a slightly rumpled suit and a slicked-back ponytail that looked like it belonged on someone 20 years younger, Ricardo. Quinn, he said, a wide, practised smile on his face. It's been too long. Zlata here finally decided to give me the time of day. He glanced at Zlata, who gave him a tight, unamused smile in return. I hear you're planning a little family reunion. My gaze flicked to Zlata. She shrugged subtly. He's persistent. I am, Ricardo confirmed, his smile not wavering, especially when there's an opportunity to right a few wrongs, and perhaps, shall we say, rebalance the scales of justice. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. I have proof, Quinn, proof that Margaret manipulated Angela's will. She cut you out, legally, and me too, for that matter. She forged Angela's signature on a codicil, claiming Angela was of unsound mind and wanted to disinherit us both just before she died. But Angela wasn't unsound. She was sharp as a tack. And I have the original untampered will, the one that left a significant portion to you and a smaller, but still substantial, amount to me. My breath hitched. Angela had tried to provide for me. Margaret had stolen it. Not just my family, but my inheritance. This was more than just emotional revenge now. This was fraud. So, Ricardo continued, his eyes gleaming with a mix of greed and genuine grievance, I hear there's a dinner next weekend, a birthday celebration. I'd be delighted to attend. As a surprise guest, of course. I looked at Zlata, then back at Ricardo. He was a snake, but he was a snake with a very sharp fang. And he had the one thing we needed most, undeniable proof. Fine, I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. Be there. Sunday. Next weekend. Chaos, it seemed, was about to bloom. Later that night, sifting through the box of Angela's letters Poppy had scanned, I found it, tucked away at the very bottom, beneath a stack of old photos, was a single, unopened envelope. The paper was thicker, the wax seal unbroken, embossed with Angela's distinctive family crest. My name wasn't on it. Instead, in Angela's elegant, slightly shaky script, it read, To the second daughter I loved. The wax seal cracked with a faint whisper, a sound like a secret finally exhaling. The letter addressed to the second daughter I loved wasn't for Poppy. It was for me. Angela, my grandmother, had written it for Margaret. My hands trembled as I unfolded the brittle paper. Angela's handwriting, usually so elegant, was shaky here, imbued with a desperate urgency. Margaret, the letter began, stark and without preamble. I know what you are doing. I know you are keeping Quinn from me, from her sister. You believe you are building a new, perfect life, but you are tearing apart the one you already have. Quinn is not a mistake. She is my granddaughter, and she deserves to know she is loved, not erased. My eyes scanned ahead, my breath catching in my throat. I have tried to make amends for your cruelty. I have instructed my lawyer to ensure Quinn is provided for, despite your attempts to control my affairs. She is to receive a substantial portion of my estate, a portion you have tried to deny her. I know you will try to stop this. You will try to manipulate and lie, as you always do. But I have made arrangements. There is a copy of my true will, the one that reflects my final wishes, hidden. It ensures Quinn's future, and it exposes your deceit. When you lose them both, Margaret, it won't be by force. It will be by your own consequence. You cannot erase the truth forever. Enclosed, tucked within the folds of the letter, was a second, smaller document. A will, not a copy, but an original, signed and witnessed. It was dated just weeks before Angela's death, and it explicitly named me, Quinn Shepherd, as a significant beneficiary, along with a smaller but still substantial amount for Ricardo. It directly contradicted the version Ricardo had described, the one Margaret had presented as Angela's final wishes. My head spun. Angela had known, she had known Margaret would try to cut me out, and she had fought for me even from her deathbed. The sheer audacity of Margaret, to intercept this, to hide it, to forge a new one, was breathtaking. Was this legally binding? Unclear. But it was real. It was Angela's truth, and it was devastating. I forwarded the scans of Angela's letter and the hidden will to Poppy, along with a short text. She knew. She fought for us. The next few days were a blur of planning and tension. Poppy, still living under Margaret's roof, was walking a tightrope. She'd text me updates, snippets of conversations, her emotional state fluctuating wildly. She just acts so normal, Poppy texted one afternoon. Like none of this is happening. It makes me sick. I knew the feeling. Margaret was a master of the facade. Poppy's breaking point came 2 days before the dinner. She'd tried to talk to Reuben. Not about me, not directly, but about her growing unease, about feeling like things weren't right, about a vague sense of unease about their family history. He just brushed me off, Poppy recounted later, her voice raw with hurt. Said I was being dramatic, that I was overthinking things. He said Margaret was under a lot of stress and I needed to be more understanding. He just doesn't see it, Quinn, or he doesn't want to. Her trust in the perfect family and the father figure who had raised her was fracturing. The golden child was seeing the rust beneath the shine. Later that day, Poppy was in the study, trying to compose herself when Margaret walked in. "Poppy, what's wrong, darling? Why are you crying?" Margaret's voice was laced with concern, a perfect performance. Poppy, quick on her feet, managed to pull herself together. "Oh, Mom, nothing, just thinking about Angela. I miss her, and I found some of her old things, some letters. It just made me sad." Margaret's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion in their depths. "Letters? What letters?" "Oh, just old ones," Poppy said, waving a dismissive hand. "From when she was younger, nothing important, just sentimental." She even managed a watery smile. "I'm fine, really. Just a moment of weakness." Margaret, seemingly satisfied, patted Poppy's shoulder. Well, don't dwell on the past, dear. It's not healthy. We have so much to look forward to. Poppy's gaslighting had worked. She'd deflected Margaret's suspicion, turning her own emotional turmoil into a cover. But the encounter had shaken her. That evening I got another text from Poppy. She's talking to Reuben in secret. I overheard a little. She said, "We can't let her see that girl again. She's talking about you, Quinn. She knows something's up." The net was tightening. Margaret was sensing a disturbance in her perfectly ordered universe. I picked up my phone, my fingers flying across the keypad. "Don't worry," I texted Poppy back. "I've already called a lawyer. Just in case, the day before the dinner, or, as Poppy had cleverly spun it to Margaret, the surprise birthday breakfast she was organising for her mom. A cover, a distraction, something to make Margaret feel in control. The actual plan, the real reckoning, was set for Sunday dinner. Poppy had sent out the invites, a flurry of texts and emails to extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, anyone Margaret would want to impress. The guest list was long, a testament to Margaret's carefully curated image. My own day was a whirlwind of nervous energy. I'd spent hours going through old boxes in my apartment, things I'd dragged from my father's house when I finally moved out at 18. Mostly junk, old school papers, faded photographs. But then tucked away in a dusty shoebox, I found it. My old flip phone from high school. The kind that stored voicemails directly on the device, not on a cloud. I'd kept it for years, a strange sentimental attachment to a time before everything truly fell apart. I charged it, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. And there they were, a string of voicemails from Lawrence, my father, from the months leading up to and immediately after Margaret's divorce from him, when Poppy was a baby. His voice, so rarely heard, was strained, desperate. "Quinn, it's Dad. Call me back, please. She's making things difficult. She's threatening to take everything if I don't agree to her terms. She says if I fight for you, she'll make sure I lose my job, my reputation. She'll make sure I never see you again. I don't know what to do, kiddo. I'm so sorry." Another message, weeks later. She's saying if I don't sign the papers, she'll accuse me of things that aren't true. I can't risk it, Quinn. I can't lose everything. She's got me over a barrel. I'm so sorry. I love you, kiddo. Always. The messages continued. A timeline of his capitulation, his fear. He hadn't abandoned me. He'd been blackmailed. Margaret had systematically dismantled his life, threatening to ruin him if he didn't give her what she wanted. A clean break, a new identity, free of any ties to her past, including me. I sank onto the floor, the old phone clutched in my hand. For 17 years I'd carried the weight of his perceived abandonment. The quiet resentment that he hadn't fought for me hadn't been strong enough. I'd built an entire emotional wall around that belief, a fortress of cynicism and self-reliance. And now it was crumbling. Margaret, always Margaret. She hadn't just disowned me, she'd engineered my father's absence too. She hadn't just erased me from her life, she'd erased me from his. The lies went deeper, spread wider than I had ever imagined. My entire understanding of my past, of my relationships, was built on her carefully constructed deceit. An emotional spiral. That's what Zlata called it when I finally called her, my voice thick with unshed tears. She got him, Zlata. She got him too. She blackmailed him. He didn't just... Let me go. Zlata listened patiently, her usual sarcasm replaced by a quiet understanding. Quinn, listen to me. This isn't a spiral. This is clarity. This is seeing the full scope of her manipulation. It hurts, yeah, it's supposed to. But it also means you're not just fighting against a mother who abandoned you. You're fighting against a woman who systematically destroyed lives to build her perfect facade. But my whole life, I choked out, everything I thought I knew. Exactly, Zlata said, her voice firm. And now you know the truth. This isn't just about revenge against Margaret. This is about reclaiming your space, reclaiming your father's truth, reclaiming your grandmother's truth, reclaiming Poppy's truth. It's about being seen, Quinn. In a family that tried to erase you, you're not just taking her down, you're building yourself back up. Her words resonated, cutting through the fog of pain and betrayal. She was right. This wasn't just about making Margaret suffer. It was about tearing down the lies that had defined my life, and finally being seen. I spent the rest of the day converting Lawrence's voicemails into audio files, adding them to the growing burn file on my laptop. The intercepted letters from Angela, the cut-out photos, Margaret's disease voicemail, Ricardo's original will, and now my father's desperate pleas. The arsenal was complete. That evening, as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed. A text from Poppy. She found something. I think she knows. The morning of the dinner felt like the calm before a hurricane. Poppy's text from the night before. She found something I think she knows, had coiled a knot of dread in my stomach. What had Margaret found? A stray text? A hidden note? Or had she simply sensed the shift in Poppy, the subtle tremor in her carefully constructed world? I dressed in a simple black dress, something understated but sharp. No point in trying to out-glam Margaret. My power wasn't in my clothes, it was in the truth I carried. Zlata had dropped off a small, discreet audio recorder no bigger than my thumb. "Just in case," she'd said, her eyes serious. "You never know what you'll need for the burn file." I clipped it to the inside of my sleeve. Poppy called me, her voice tight with nerves. She's acting normal, too normal. She just keeps asking if I'm excited for my birthday breakfast. It's creepy. "Stay strong," I told her. "Remember why we're doing this." "I am," she whispered. I'm scared." "Me too," I admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability. But the fear was quickly eclipsed by the cold, hard resolve that had been building inside me for 17 years. When I arrived, the Sanderson house was already bustling. Margaret's house, not my childhood home, but the grand, imposing structure she'd built her new life around. Cars lined the manicured driveway. Extended family members, faces I barely recognized from faded photographs or distant memories, milled about in the foyer, sipping mimosas. Margaret, at 54, was a vision of effortless elegance in a pale blue silk dress. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling with the practiced charm of a woman who had mastered the art of illusion. She greeted each guest with a warm embrace, a perfect hostess. Reuben, 60 and looking every bit the oblivious, wealthy husband, hovered at her side, beaming. I spotted Poppy near the dining room, her back to me. She wore a simple gold locket, a delicate chain around her neck. As she turned, I saw it. Tucked inside, visible through the glass, was a tiny, faded baby photo. My baby photo. A picture of me as an infant taken by Angela before Margaret had started her campaign of erasure. Poppy was wearing it, hidden in plain sight, a silent declaration. My heart gave a strange lurch. Ricardo was there too, leaning against a doorway, nursing a glass of champagne, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory gleam. He caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. The snake was ready to strike. The moment came when Margaret clapped her hands, her voice ringing out, "Everyone, please, let's take our seats. Poppy has a little surprise for us. The dining room was vast, a polished mahogany table stretching the length of the room, set with Margaret's finest china and crystal. Everyone began to find their places. Poppy, her face pale but determined, walked over to me. She took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Mom, Dad, everyone," she announced, her voice trembling slightly but clear. "I have a very special surprise guest for our family dinner." Margaret's smile faltered, a tiny crack in her perfect facade. Her eyes, usually so composed, darted to me, then back to Poppy. Reuben looked confused. Poppy led me to an empty seat directly across from Margaret. "This is Quinn," she said, her voice gaining strength. My sister." A hush fell over the room. Forks clinked against plates, then silence. Faces turned, confusion warring with recognition. Some of the older relatives, the ones who remembered me, gasped. Margaret's smile had vanished entirely, replaced by a mask of controlled fury. "Quinn," Reuben finally stammered, his brow furrowed. "But, Margaret, you said—" "I know this is a shock for some of you," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the stunned silence. My fingers brushed the discreet recorder under my sleeve. "But it's time for some truths to come out." I pulled out my phone, connecting it to a small portable speaker Poppy had set up, ostensibly for music. Poppy mentioned to me that our mother often talks about people who are toxic, like a disease. I wanted you all to hear exactly what she means. I pressed play. Margaret's smooth, elegant voice filled the room, amplified and chilling. "Oh, darling, sometimes people are just toxic, like a disease, really. You cut them out and you heal. You thrive. It's for the best, believe me." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Margaret's face was stone, but her eyes were darting, searching for an escape. "And that's not all," Ricardo said, stepping forward, a thick envelope in his hand. "Some of you might remember Angela McCoy, Margaret's mother, my sister. She left a will, a very specific one, that was never honoured." He pulled out 2 documents. "This," he said, holding up one, "is the will Margaret presented after Angela's death, claiming Angela disinherited Quinn and me due to unsound mind. And this," he held up the other, "is the actual, original will, signed and witnessed, leaving a substantial portion to Quinn and a smaller sum to me. Margaret forged a codicil. She committed probate fraud." Gasps erupted. Reuben's face was a mask of shock and betrayal. Margaret's hands, resting on the table, began to tremble, just barely. Her glass of wine, still untouched, vibrated with the tiny tremor. Then Poppy, her eyes blazing, reached for her locket. She unclipped it, holding it up for everyone to see. "And this," she said, her voice ringing with a new fierce clarity, "is a photo of me as a toddler with my sister Quinn, taken before our mother cut her out of our lives, before she cut her out of our family photos, before she tried to erase her from existence." The photo, small and faded, showed a tiny Poppy, maybe 2 years old, laughing, held in the arms of a smiling 13-year-old me. It was a moment frozen in time, a tangible piece of the past Margaret had tried to destroy. Margaret, for the first time, looked truly rattled. Her facade, so carefully maintained, was finally cracking. Her eyes, usually so cold and unreadable, flickered with something akin to panic. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her glass of wine trembled violently. Finally she spoke, her voice low, raspy, but still laced with a chilling authority. "I knew this day would come, but you two haven't considered the price. I knew this day would come, but you two haven't considered the price." Margaret's voice was low, a dangerous hiss, yet it carried across the stunned silence of the dining room. Her eyes, usually so composed, burned with an icy fury. She finally pushed back from the table, rising to her full height, a queen dethroned but still regal in her rage. You think you know everything. You think you've exposed some great truth." She laughed, a brittle, humourless sound that scraped against my ears. "The truth is, I was never meant to be a mother. I was trapped in a marriage I hated to a man I despised." Her gaze flicked to Reuben, then back to me, full of venom. "Quinn was my one mistake, a consequence of a life I desperately wanted to escape." My blood ran cold. She was saying it, out loud, the thing I'd always suspected, the unspoken truth that had festered in my gut for years. "And you, Poppy," Margaret continued, turning her gaze to my sister, her voice softening, but only barely. "You were my chance to do it right, to have a perfect family, a perfect child, free from the mistakes of the past. I saved you, Poppy. I saved you from that, from her." She gestured at me with a hand that trembled slightly. "I isolated her because I had to protect you, to protect us, to build the life we deserved." Reuben, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally pushed his chair back with a screech. His face was a mottled red, a mixture of shock and profound humiliation. "Margaret, what are you saying? What is this?" "The truth, Reuben," Margaret spat, turning on him. "The truth you were too blind or too willfully ignorant to see. I built this for us, all of it." But Reuben wasn't listening. He stood, shaking his head, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "My God," he whispered, looking from Margaret to me, then to Poppy, his perfect world shattering around him. He turned abruptly and stormed out of the dining room, his heavy footsteps echoing through the house. A few other relatives, older aunts and cousins who had known Margaret since childhood, began to rise, their faces etched with disgust. They didn't say a word, but their silent departure was a louder condemnation than any shout. The carefully curated guest list was thinning. Ricardo stepped forward, holding up the original will and Angela's condemning letter. "This isn't just about family drama, Margaret. This is probate fraud. This is a criminal offence. I've already spoken to a lawyer." "We're taking legal action," Margaret scoffed, a desperate attempt at her usual dismissive laugh. "Probate fraud? Don't be ridiculous, Ricardo. Angela was old. She was confused. This is nothing more than a desperate attempt to get your hands on money you don't deserve." She looked around the room, expecting someone to laugh with her, to rally to her side. No one did. The remaining guests stared at her with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Her perfect audience was gone. Poppy, who had been standing silently beside me, her face a mask of controlled fury, finally spoke. Her voice was clear, unwavering, cutting through Margaret's bluster. "You made sure I was your perfect child. You made sure I had everything. You made sure I believed every lie. But you didn't save me, Mum. You just made me blind. And now I see. I choose to be Quinn's sister. And you made me your enemy." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock replacing the anger. This was the golden child, the one she had moulded, the one she had believed was hers, utterly and completely. And Poppy had just chosen me. A guttural sound escaped Margaret's throat. Her hand shot out, a blur of pale silk and manicured nails, aimed straight for Poppy's face. I moved without thinking. My hand shot up, catching Margaret's wrist mid-air, my fingers clamping down hard. Her eyes, wide and wild, locked with mine. The air crackled with raw, untamed rage. For a split second we were locked in a silent, furious tableau, mother and daughter, two forces colliding. Then Margaret ripped her arm free, her face contorted with a primal scream of frustration and defeat. She turned, stumbled, and fled from the dining room, her silk dress rustling like angry whispers. We heard the rapid thud of her heels on the stairs, followed by the violent slam of a door upstairs, rattling the very foundations of the house. Silence descended once more, heavy and absolute. The remaining guests looked at each other, then at Poppy and me, before quietly excusing themselves, melting away like shadows. Soon, only Poppy, Ricardo and I remained in the vast, shattered dining room. I looked around the empty, opulent space. The crystal gleamed, the china was undisturbed, but the air was thick with the dust of shattered illusions. It was finally over. The performance was done. "It's finally over," I said, the words feeling strangely hollow, yet also profoundly true. Poppy, her eyes still wide, nodded slowly. She reached out, taking my hand, her grip still firm. We stood there for a moment, two sisters, finally together in the wreckage. Then, as my gaze drifted towards the heavy wooden door Margaret had fled through, I saw it. Leaning against the doorframe, almost hidden by the ornate moulding, was a small, cream-coloured envelope, sealed in red wax. The small, cream-coloured envelope, sealed in red wax, leaned against the doorframe, a final, silent accusation in the shattered quiet of the dining room. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked it up. The wax seal, Angela's family crest, was unmistakable, no name on the front, but the scent of lavender, faint but persistent, clung to the paper. It was for Margaret, and it was from Angela. Poppy came to stand beside me, her breath catching as she saw the envelope. Ricardo, ever the opportunist, hovered nearby, his eyes sharp with curiosity. I broke the seal. The paper was crisp, the handwriting firm, unlike the shaky script of the last letter Angela had sent me. This was Angela's voice, clear and strong, speaking from beyond the grave. "Margaret," it began, just as the other letter had. "If you are reading this, it means you have finally faced the consequences of your actions. You have tried to erase Quinn, to deny her existence, to sever her ties to this family and to me. You have manipulated, you have lied, you have stolen. You have built your perfect life on a foundation of deceit and the broken hearts of others." My eyes scanned ahead, the words burning into my mind. "I tried to protect Quinn. I tried to ensure her future. I tried to show you the error of your ways. But you chose your path. You chose to be cruel. You chose to be selfish. You chose to believe that you could simply rewrite history and discard those who inconveniently reminded you of your past. Understand this, Margaret. When you lose them both, it won't be by force. It will be by your own consequence. You cannot erase the truth forever, and the truth, Margaret, always finds its way home." The letter ended there, a stark, damning indictment. It was Angela's final word, a posthumous condemnation of her daughter's betrayal. Margaret had hidden it, just as she had hidden everything else, hoping to bury the truth forever. But the truth, as Angela had promised, had found its way home. Weeks later, the dust began to settle, though the air still felt thick with the residue of shattered porcelain. Ricardo, true to his word, had initiated legal proceedings against Margaret, probate fraud among other charges. The original will, Angela's letter to Margaret, and the evidence of Margaret's manipulation of my father, Lawrence, formed a formidable case. The legal battle would be long and messy, but the damage to Margaret's pristine reputation was already done. The whispers had begun, and in her world, reputation was everything. Poppy, now 18, had moved out of Margaret and Reuben's house. She'd packed a single suitcase the morning after the dinner, leaving a short, terse note for Margaret. She stayed with Zlata for a few days, then found a small apartment near the university she planned to attend in the fall. We talked every day, sometimes for hours. She was still processing, still grieving the loss of the mother she thought she knew, but there was a quiet strength growing in her, a fierce independence I recognized. She was no longer the golden child. She was simply Poppy, forging her own path. We were building a quiet new life together. Reuben, humiliated and betrayed, filed for divorce. The news spread through their social circles like wildfire. He was a man who valued appearances above all else, and Margaret had publicly shattered his. He began the process of separating their assets, draining her credibility and reputation with every legal filing. The perfect facade Margaret had built with him was crumbling, brick by painstaking brick. One crisp autumn afternoon, Poppy and I drove to Angela's grave. It was a quiet cemetery bathed in the soft golden light of the setting sun. We stood there for a long time, side by side, the silence comforting. "She loved you," Poppy said softly, looking at the headstone. "She really did, even when Mom tried to stop it." "She loved you too," I replied, thinking of the letter addressed to the second daughter I loved, and how Angela had tried to protect both of us from Margaret's cruelty. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the gold locket Poppy had worn that day, the one with my baby photo inside. It was a symbol of everything Margaret had tried to erase, and everything we had reclaimed. With a small, sharp pair of clippers I'd brought, I carefully cut the locket in half. One half, with my baby photo, I handed to Poppy. The other half, empty but still bearing the faint imprint of the photo, I kept. We placed Poppy's half of the locket on Angela's headstone, a silent offering, a promise. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. A piece of our shared history finally laid to rest, and a new one beginning. Revenge doesn't fix the past. It doesn't erase the pain or bring back the years stolen. But watching karma come home, watching the carefully constructed world of the woman who tried to erase me crumble under the weight of her own lies, that's something I'll never apologize for.